Pe takoto nei mena tuki o te tau, tēnā koutou. Ko te mihi ki ngā hunga mate, kua whetūrangitia haere 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 atu rā. Kei te mihi ki ngā mana whenua o Aotearoa katoa, tēnā koutou. E ngā rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. Toitu te mana mo te hake, toitu te tiriti o Waitangi, tēnā koutou. E mihi ana kia koutou, kua tae mai ki tēnei kaupapa hira hira Māori Wellbeing Economies, no mai haere mai. Me ngā mihi o te tau hou. So welcome everybody. I'm just acknowledge Rangi and Papa, our Sky Father and Earth Mother, and Aotearoa and all the living systems in between them which we are a part of. I've acknowledged those who have passed and your ancestors. I've acknowledged mana whenua, the Indigenous peoples of Aotearoa we're here to talk about, and I acknowledge the permanence of Māori self-determination and Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And it's also just been New Year here in Aotearoa, so just wanted to call that out. So in the southern hemisphere, so Manawatia a Matariki, where we celebrated Matariki and Puanga. And then, yeah, welcoming you all to this call today. Ko Chellie aho, ko tangata tiriti. I'm Chellie. I'm the Knowledge and Engagement Lead for the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Aotearoa. So it's such a privilege to be co-hosting this call with Margaret and the global crew for this policymakers session. So at this point, I'll pass back over to Margaret, but kia ora koutou.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chellie, for that beautiful karakia to open our session today. And a very warm welcome to this session of the Global Wellbeing Economy Policymakers Network. I've been looking forward to this session for months, so it's very exciting to have you all here today. Now, today's session is jointly hosted by the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, including both its global and Aotearoa New Zealand teams. And so you've just met the wonderful Chellie and also the Zoe Institute for Future Fit Economies. And maybe, Laura, maybe you can give us a little wave after. So my name is Margriet Freeling. I'm a knowledge co-lead at the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. And as a Policymakers Network, we host 4 sessions like these a year, focused on practical applications of wellbeing economy governance. In between sessions, we then send out a quarterly newsletter with the latest case studies of wellbeing economy ways of working in governments around the world.
Wellbeing economies.
I think we've got a little bit of background noise, so if you could please mute yourself when you're coming into the room. Thank you so much. The aim of these sessions today is to offer an informal space focused on public policy where we can openly share knowledge and questions and can learn from each other really in moving forward in this important transition. And so we host these sessions as open sessions as we believe that public policy is just as relevant for policymakers as it is for the public. So I hope that we can make you feel at home. If you can turn your video on, it would be lovely to see your beautiful faces as it makes for an even more engaging session. But of course, I also appreciate if that may not be possible where you are right now. We will and we are recording this session so that we can share it with other members afterwards. And as there are quite a few of us today, so we've had over 230 registrations for today's session. So thank you also to all of you who've posted and have reposted and have helped us to spread the word. But as there are quite a few of us here, please do put your questions in the chat throughout the session so that we can get a sense of some of the shared questions that people might be holding. So with that, I'll hand back over to Chellie, who will introduce our amazing speakers for today.
Yeah, kia ora, Margaret. So first up, we're really privileged to hear from Chellie Spiller, who is a Professor of Leadership at Te Whariwānanga o Waikato, the University of Waikato in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and has just co-authored a book towards Māori Economies of Wellbeing. Yeah, that's just been published. So for today's session, Chellie will offer guiding principles for what governance and leadership looks like in a Māori wellbeing economy. So ka whiu te mauri ki a koe, Chellie. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chellie. Kei te mihi nui ki a koe mō tō mihi a tāhua I tēnei pō. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe hoki, Margaret, mō tō awhi, mō tō tautoko o I tēnei hui. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā hau e whā, tēnā koutou katoa. So it's a real pleasure to be here. For those of you who don't know Te Reo Māori, I just acknowledged Chellie and Marguerite for their organising. I also see Paul Dalziel in the room, so really acknowledge you too, Paul, for your role in making tonight happen and make the introductions happen. And really acknowledge all the people who have gathered here, the people of the Four Winds who have joined us, all the languages that you speak and your ancestral lines. It's a real honour to be here and to share the research from this Māori Economies of Wellbeing book and research that's been taking place over the last 3 or so years. So it's my honour to bring that to you tonight and give you a quick dip into it. So I'm going to share my screen and take you on a bit of a whirlwind tour through the book. But of course, we've got time at the end for you to be able to ask questions and engage. I'm very happy to receive emails as well. So this is a copy of the book that's just been released. We did it as an open access, free to download book, along with a dictionary of Māori terms. But I thought it'd be probably helpful for some of you, especially those around the world, to frame the new economy, which for many Indigenous peoples is not so much new NEW, but KNEW, and I acknowledge all the Indigenous peoples in our space here tonight as well. And it's really a way of remembering and staying connected to a deep philosophy of being that's been transmitted from one generation to the next through millennia. And despite all the upheavals of colonization, globalization, and industrialization, there are still these eternal threads that hold the way that we do our economies in practice. And these are very much living webs of well-being that we create. And these are some of the dimensions of a Māori economy that are interconnected, very much based on reciprocity, oriented to the collective. As I'll speak tonight a little bit more, the starting place, the beginning and the end is the spiritual, and offering a balanced look at how do we create well-being and seeking to not have a dominance of one dimension over the other. How can we be adaptive, holistic, and more decentralized? Now, as many of you know, Indigenous peoples are responsible for safeguarding something like 80% of the world's biodiversity. So this is a remarkable feat, which is achieved by just some 370 million individuals across 5,000 distinct societies. So representing just 5% of the population. So Indigenous peoples around the world are some of the most skilled, insightful sustainability experts that we have on the planet today. And as Sacha is going to be talking to you shortly, she's been doing incredible work for many, many years, and it's a real honour to be alongside you tonight, Sacha, but driving well-being economy efforts, particularly at the policy level and at the national governmental level. So I'll probably have to frame a few things because I'm aware we've got lots of New Zealanders, lots of Māori in our space, but also welcoming people from around the world. So I'm going to just share a bit of an overview of the Māori economy, just to sort of orient some of you to what is a Māori economy. It's a subset of the wider economy. And as you can see here, it's got around $126 billion of assets, and with 50% of the fishing quota is owned and managed by Māori. We've got a population now of around 1 million, which is 17% of New Zealand. So the Māori economy contributes around 9% to our GDP, so around $32 billion. Now, I recognise in global terms that's not a lot. Some individuals themselves have that much money, but for us, this is quite a significant contribution and impact in the context of the New Zealand economy. And to really, I guess, set up some of the differences between how Māori like to do their wellbeing economies, and maybe contrasting that to some of the wider perspectives that we're all very familiar with. But I want to introduce you to this word whānau. So when you see that word whānau, just think family. And so I will be using that word a lot tonight because the research that we've just conducted, and I think the link's going to go into the chat if it hasn't already, but was to put families or whānau at the centre of the economy. So we take a really long-term view. We look at traditional economics right throughout time when Māori arrived in Aotearoa to the present day, where whānau are the building blocks of society. Whānau, the building blocks of economies, not individuals. So we've really wanted to centre whānau in our research and position them at the heart of economic transformation. So it very much celebrates Māori futures that are distinctively grounded in Māori values while fostering pathways for more meaningful lives and for whānau to have self-determination about what a good life looks like. And it's, as I mentioned, the spiritual dimensions of a Māori economy are the starting point. So it's, instead of this idea of trickle down, it's very much an emanating out movement, an emanating out from the family, from the whānau, and not just the people in the human community, but also all of creation. So the ecological community, the places in which whānau identify with, through which they belong, as stewards, as what we call kaitiaki of place. So it's a framework which we call whakapapa or genealogical ties, but these genealogies really connect people throughout time to all of the places that they belong, the ecological dimensions, the spiritual, the social, as well as the environmental. So it's very much challenges this idea of the trickle-down myth. In the book that you're all welcome to download, our starting place is what we call an economy of mana. And this work around mana, which I guess is very hard to translate into English, but it's around dignity, power, status from a divine source, and it gives people a sense of who they are, our identity, and we draw our mana from many sources, such as from place, from our genealogical lines, and so forth. So we build on, in the book, from Manuka Henare, who was a great thinker and thought leader in terms of Māori economies, and we really build on Manuka's ideas of an economy of mana, which emanates from a Māori worldview, is informed by traditional Māori economies. It's a holistic view of well-being, as I've already mentioned. But as Manuka used to say, it's a system capable of reorganizing itself and adapting to create new futures. And this was very much a part of the research project. When we sat down, we spoke with whānau, we looked at family businesses and so forth to really understand what does a good life look like for them. We developed sort of, I guess, building on Manuka's work, these 8 mana touchstones. I won't go through them one by one. You can read the slide, but these are also more oriented towards whānau to help them create those pathways to meaningful futures that they see and that they want to create. So it's more like, I guess, really, what would I say? It's really appreciating and supporting that each whānau has its own system, its own DNA, and that's the starting place. So not a kind of a boilerplate template approach to economies, but really coming alongside families and asking them what is it that they want to see achieved in their life. And I'm going to share some of the stories that I've heard during the past 3.5 years of doing this research, which was funded by 𝐊𝐴 o Te Maramatanga. And one of the orienting ideas in the research is that of cultural match, which is like when I think I first met Sacha, we were both at Harvard University working with the Harvard Project on Native American Economic Development, where for some 35 years they've been looking at cultural match. So when Indigenous societies are making decisions that match their ideas culturally about what a good life looks like, what well-being looks like, then those tribes and communities really turn things around for the better. So self-determination was an abiding principle of this research of wellbeing economies. And part of the project, we supported 𝐊𝐴 𝐞𝐰 here, who produced a dictionary of Māori terms, Māori economic terms. So part of the cultural match effort is to include ideas and concepts from within Te Reo Māori, within the Māori language. So 𝐊𝐴 did an amazing job. He's got some 900 entries in this dictionary. He's a fluent Te Reo speaker and a captioner with Māori television over here. So part of the effort is to reclaim these terms, even if they are Western ideas and have come out of economic or finance disciplines, but to reorganize them and reclaim them from within a Māori way of looking at things. These are some of the families that I sat with when I came through. I thought I'd like to share some of their stories with you tonight because, you know, to really humanize this conversation about wellbeing economies. So I interviewed 4 different whānau from around the country, and they're very intergenerational, as you can see here in the pictures. We had young people from about 4 years old right through to young adults, going through to elders and grandparents. And so their task was I took along sand play. So we had built these, as you can see on the screen here. I took along all these elements that they could utilize and build pictures of what a good life looks like for each of them. Absolutely stunning stories coming through. And alongside the research that Jason Meeker did in businesses, Jared Haar did in workplaces, John Reed did around class, and also what 𝐊𝐴 was doing with the dictionary, I came alongside families to listen to their stories at that grassroots level. So I was pretty blown away by what these particularly the younger ones had to say, but again, coming back to some of the ideas that were really coming out here was the centrality of spirituality. Everybody had some expression of the importance of that source, that deep connected source to spirit, and also to ancestral lines. If we look at Philippa there, she's in the top left corner. She's a 13-year-old Māori girl. She lives down in Heretaunga in the North Island of New Zealand. And I loved what Philippa put forward here. So Philippa's got a whare in front of her, a little, the White House. She's also got some sustenance in the middle with a chest, and you can see a gold chest there, hopefully. And that represents her taonga tuku iho. So the treasures of the culture are really important. So she has centered them in her sand play there. And then at the end, she's got a gravestone. And when she was telling the story of her picture to us, Philippa said that gravestone is her. That gravestone is her looking forward to when she's able to pass on this well-being, the idea of a good life to her family. So I was just, blown away really, because this intergenerational thinking is so deeply embedded in our children and our youth and in our whānau that it's, I don't think it's common around the world that people will be thinking in such intergenerational terms. This picture here illustrates the idea of a woven universe that's at the heart of a Māori way of looking at things, that everything is interconnected, our values are interconnected, we are not separate from the earth, from the places that sustain us, and our responsibility as kaitiaki, as stewards, our idea of a good life is when the places in which we live and inhabit are thriving. Without that, there is no good life, there is no well-being. So for all those interviews and for many of the people present here today, I know it's to affirm that whānau are the building blocks of successful societies. The economy is part of that fabric alongside these other dimensions of well-being. What we found in the research, and I really want to sort of acknowledge Matt Rout, who did a lot of the theorizing chapters in the book, which is like 460 pages, and he's got a whole chunk in the middle there that speaks very explicitly to wellbeing economies, but is the importance of networks, that successful economies for whānau is when they are networked and they are connected to their iwi, to their tribe, to their hapu, their sub-tribe, that there is a strong sense of interconnected, of reciprocity that's going in at a community level as well. So the design features of these networks are that they're visionary and guided, that they're localized, very place specific and connected. Not to say they're not out there in the world doing amazing things, but the sense of mutuality and nurturing and caring, being adaptive and also ensuring that information was there and integrated and proximate, meaning that they want close relationships. I am really conscious of time. I was given a strict 15 minutes and I want to make sure we've got time for Sacha and also for your questions. But this is in the book, we kind of really dive into 6 different kinds of global wellbeing economies. And you can see here some of the links that we've made to those economies from a Māori perspective. So the green meaning there's a really strong link, and the orange meaning that there is quite a good link there. So we see a lot of convergences with what's going on around the world in terms of the endeavours by people such as yourselves for global wellbeing economy frameworks, that we don't inhabit a parallel universe, notwithstanding we have our own cultural ways of doing things. We really could see that there are these touchstones with people such as yourselves and the work that's going on around the world. So I'm going to stop there. You'll get the handouts so that you can have a look at some of those implications for policymakers and be really interested to hear some of the questions and the thoughts that you have. Thank you.
Oh, kia ora, Chellie. Wow, so much information. A huge mihi for all your work that you've done over time and also in this presentation. I think in my mind that emanates out, not trickles down, will really stick with me, is that is more of the reality of economies, and that there's the ripple effect and the interconnectedness of te taiao and people, and economies are there for the well-being of us all. So yeah, kia ora koutou for that. Now next up we'll go straight into it, the wonderful Sacha McMeeking, who is the Senior Research Fellow at Te Wānanga o Aotearoa and led the development of 𝐊𝐧𝐞𝐰, which is the Māori Wellbeing framework that is used to inform policy decision-making in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and its accompanying handbook that helps policymakers to implement 𝐊𝐴 into their day-to-day work. So ka pai, ka whitamuri kia koe, Sacha.
Tēnā koutou, e rere ana nā mihi mata koe kia koutou, kia koe sari, ko whakatūwhero tō tātou hui. Ka mihi, kia koe te tuakana, ka nui te mihi aroha kia koe Chellie. Kia koutou no ngā hawe whā, e rere ana nā mihi anō. It is a real joy to join with you while we are literally in darkness, and for many of you, you are in light, which I'm sure is symbolic about the collective journey that we're all on here together. I think if forging a wellbeing economy was easy, we would have done it already, and we're all united in this struggle. And so it's always a pleasure to join with hearts that share a common purpose. And what I want to talk about are some tools that both operationalize the work that Chellie has been talking about, and also have a deep honga to kind of our shared intellectual godfather, Papa Mānuka Hinari. So Chellie has honoured his legacy with the beautiful work that she's just been talking about. And with Kia Waiora, Professor Mānuka Hinari gifted in a framework that he developed, which has evolved into the architecture of thinking about wellbeing policy tools within Aotearoa, New Zealand, that can provide a really practical roadmap for doing things in the day-to-day. Because I think one of our common struggles when we're trying to change the world is moving from that realm of understanding and being enchanted by principles and deeply moving human stories. I felt my eyes get leaky when you shared those photos, Chellie. It's about the ability to translate those things we hold dear into habits that create the change that we aspire to. So the space that I've been inhabiting for the last few years has been very much focused on what are the tools that people who are doing their do can use to do the do differently. And I just want to share two of them tonight, which are so hot off the press, they haven't actually made it to the press yet. And this first one that is on the screen now is a systems map. So we're all really familiar with the iceberg approach to systems thinking and a number of other global systems maps that I think are really valuable contributions. What we've been working on is building out the work that Papa Mānuka Hinari left us into a systems map that can help us understand in potentially a simpler and more intuitive way the interdependencies that we need to grapple with to create the transformative change that we aspire to. And this system map that's on the screen has been built out through doing some work on addressing child poverty. So what this system map aims to do is identify 4 systems domains. One is kawa, and kawa, as Papa Mānuka would describe it, is the moral imperative or the paradigm. So it is the deep thoughts and moral positions we bring on what is a good life. And Chelle's work is a beautiful articulation of those constitutive factors. What matters for a good life is wairoa, it's spirituality, it's connection to beyond the self. It's about having a cohesive identity and belonging and connectedness. And within the systems map, we would see these as being the upstream factors to transformative change. In order to create any of the change on any of the grand challenges that we're all committed to, we need to engage with these deepest intrinsic factors to our good life, however we might define that to be. So if we want to create change on child poverty or climate change, we have to engage both with the societal narratives that shape our lived experience and expectations about our own identities and our connectedness to each other. And we also, on a human level, need to work with the identities that individuals and whānau and communities carry about themselves, because those narratives are, in our view, the most constraining or enabling forces on our individual and collective sense of aspiration and agency. And arguably, there can be no trajectories that are bolder or more courageous or more heartening if there isn't the presence of aspiration and agency as the first precursor. So that's the first systems domain. The second systems domain is tikanga, and the way that Papa Mānuka described it was primarily about the systemic or structural factors. And these are broadly aligned to the social determinants of health that will be familiar to many. So things such as our labour market, our social safety net, those structural conditions that have a fundamental impact on how we might experience both the upstream and the downstream factors. In the third domain, ritanga, this is about our behavioural components. Individually and collectively, what do we choose to do and why do we choose to do it? And how do we shape the conditions that might inspire or encourage or enable us to make decisions about different pathways? And the final systems domain is the one that's more observable, āhuatanga. So what are the presenting manifestations of a particular thing? So for child poverty, it might be before and after housing costs, and other very tangible dimensions of whatever the grand challenge is. And between each of those domains, we think there are loops of interaction, because each of these domains shapes what happens above and below it. So between kawa and tikanga, between those deepest, most intrinsic constitutive factors of well-being and the structural conditions that we encounter, there's an interacting loop where structural factors shape our identity narratives that impact on our levels of aspiration and agency, that in the context of child poverty manifests as an intergenerational poverty loop. Whānau families, one of the reasons they remain trapped in experiences of poverty is because there's intergenerationally framed narratives about the realms of possibility they can and should pursue. Between tikanga, the structural dimensions, and ritanga, there's another interacting loop where those structural conditions shape our motivations, they shape our capabilities, which then impacts on the decisions that we can or do make. And then one that I really struggled to frame politely as the policy tension loop between ritanga and āhuatanga is that often our policy making remains very much downstream. Our policy solutions aim to address the visible dimensions that in the iceberg model is a bit of the iceberg you can see. And for us, the same kind of principle applies, that we get short-termist policies that are dealing with what is easy to describe, but not with the transformative factors that are needed to create real change. And what I hope with this systems map is that even though this one is built for the purposes of child poverty, that it can help us think about the cascading and intersecting relationships across systems domains, so that we could perhaps use these types of maps to create the coalitions of the willing and turn them into collaborative action networks. Because I think one of the things we often have when it comes to how do we create a wellbeing economy or whatever the kaupapa is that we aspire to, it's that we talk to each other about the particular lever that we are in love with. And the lever that we are in love with will no doubt be very important, but it is one lever amongst many. And often when we talk about those levers of change, they're laden with our own assumptions about the interrelationships between different causal factors. They might be laden with a particular lens that says without structural change, no change can happen. This kind of map enables us to see the place and the value of all of the efforts that are needed. I think no one on this call will believe that we live in a time where a silver bullet will save us from anything meaningful. We're all here because we're searching for the symphonic harmony of solutions. And the goal with this type of systems map is for us to be able to see the pieces of the symphony and to intentionally calibrate our own harmonies towards a genuinely collective endeavour. And I think that's one of the real powers of Indigenous knowledge, and of bringing Indigenous knowledge into practicable policy tools is that the way we see interdependencies, the way we value all and the lane of all can enable everyone to have space, because everything does matter and everything and everyone is needed for the kind of transformative change we're aspiring to. So this systems map, in a really practical sense, we just used it to facilitate a cross-sectoral dialogue on child poverty. And I think the greatest testament to its utility is that it didn't actually get talked about. People didn't debate the systems map. People just worked with the systems map because it was intuitive. They could see themselves and they could see how it could move us towards a harmonisation across many. That could also mean we need to do some further work on it and level it up. But for now, I'm going to bank it as a positive sign that this type of systems map makes a contribution. And resulting from that summit and other pieces of work is the second tool that I would like to introduce from the next slide, which is an alternative intervention logic. So for any of you who are engaged in the day-to-day of policy, you've probably got a love-hate relationship with intervention logic models. And no doubt somewhere along the line, many people have forced you to fill them out. Those very tidy boxes where you move from inputs to activity, to outputs, to outcomes, to impacts. And I think they're really wonderful for factory line efficiency and completely incapable of helping us to solve the grandest challenges of our time. And the reason for that is I think they suffer from the curse of linearity. Those intervention logic models assume that to create change, we need to find a solution that directly correlates to the nature of the problem that we are trying to solve. Which for really narrow problems or for things that are urgent symptomatic responses is probably genuinely helpful. But for things where we are trying to engage with complex causation, or where we're trying to create a future that we aspire to but is not yet real to us, I think they're spectacularly unhelpful. I think if you think about any experience you've had in your life that has been profoundly transforming of your personal journey, you will not find a linear causal relationship. You will find elements of serendipity, of personal connection, of all of the mana touchstones that Chellie so beautifully has brought into the world of light. And so this kind of intervention logic, what it's trying to do is disconnect us from that heavy dependency on assuming linearity. It's trying to help us move to think about the things that are tidy activities, the what is literally the activity box in a standard intervention logic is actually irrelevant. That instead of fixating on doing the perfect activity, what we need to be looking at is how we are creating the experiences, the conditions, the infrastructure in place that engages with those kawa level determinants in the systems map. So how are we fostering things that effectively reconstitute all of the good parts of a village? How do we do things in a way that connects people to Wairoa? How do we do things in a way that connects people to a genuine sense of belonging, that triggers a sense of personal responsibility, to realise potential and opportunity. And from triggering those deeper determinants, the focus should no longer, using this model, be on what are the outputs and outcomes. The focus should be to what extent is there a trajectory shift? To what extent and how well is the trajectory, the pathway of individuals, families, communities changing? To what extent has aspiration and agency been catalyzed into a virtuous circle that leads to something else? And finally, how are we engaging with things that stabilize that trajectory shift? And how are we intentionally mitigating those things that will destabilize the trajectory shift? And I think this intervention logic is very much emergent. It's a work in progress, and no doubt it will evolve. But what it aims to do is to help us see things not for what they look like, but for what they do. And I think one of the beautiful examples that was talked about at the summit we had the other week on child poverty is that one of our favorite solutions to people experiencing poverty is that we will put them through a financial literacy program. And there's all kinds of complexities with that. But the simplest response to that was, do I want to be taught financial literacy sitting in someone else's space by a social service provider who might genuinely care about me? Or is the thing that we actually need to get back to the place where it's our nannies that are teaching us about financial management when they're talking to us about our pocket money age 3? Because there's a fundamentally different thing going on there, which is the financial literacy by the nanny is just the cherry on top. It's the ancillary thing. The real thing which is occurring is about intergenerational support networks, which build resilience and protective factors and things like that, which I think if there's lots of the ways that we try to create positive social impact that leads to genuine well-being, that I think are well-intended and fundamentally misguided because they fixate on the perfection of the activity rather than that the activity should merely be a doorway to attract people back in to experiences that reconstitute their village. Because as Chellie said, well-being emanates from the whānau, it doesn't trickle down from elegant policy solutions. And this intervention logic invites us to not only see things differently, but then to cascade it through the policy architecture that we put in place. Because around the world, when governments are commissioning for social impact, pretty much they prescribe the activity. There is a mother with mental health issues over in that community. We will prescribe, so we will seek solutions that have some kind of proper, credible mental health orientation, and that will be delivered to that mama experiencing mental health challenges. And you get contracted, and then you have to be very, very good at your data management to prove exactly how many people you contacted and their levels of satisfaction and all of those kind of things. Which is not wrong, because some of those mechanisms are really important triage contributions. But is that actually going to create durable trajectory shifts that lead to a different future for that mum who is experiencing times of darkness? Or should we be opening it up to the powers of human creativity and saying to that community, we think that maternal mental health can best be transformed by creating networks and communities and moments of joy and opportunities that create beautiful 20-minute bonding sessions between mama and baby. Dear community who know and love your people, give us your best ideas for how to achieve those impact mechanisms. Give us your ideas about how you will recreate these building blocks of a village. And in asking for that, there's just limitless opportunities that could come out. Perhaps someone in the community is really avidly passionate about indoor netball, and at which point you've got momentum behind an indoor netball competition that has childcare built in, and mamas come play netball, which with people looking after their babies, which has got multiple gains. For anyone who can still remember the times when they didn't sleep or interact with other adults when they had young ones. And it also creates a doorway that's potentially people who do immunizations could walk through, and things like that. Or perhaps it's someone who wants to bring mums together with old people in their community so that old people in their community can teach them how to do vegetable gardening, which in many places is a lost art, and in doing so solves elderly loneliness, food security, and creates an intergenerational network around a young family. Like, there's just two potential examples, and they are limited only by how much time we might like to spend thinking about how we reconstitute villages that engage with those deepest intrinsic factors for well-being. You know, we could go anywhere, but if we're going to go anywhere like that, we need to have this type of intervention logic that then leads to profoundly different commissioning models, that then leads to profoundly different data and evidence collection procedures that are more focused on how do we see these impact mechanisms which might have been invisible, and how do we see trajectory shift and those things. And I think these types of tools are increasingly coming out of Indigenous communities, because we've spent time trying to translate the air that we breathe, both to ourselves and to other communities with decision-making responsibilities, and that those conceptual models are powerful. We needed them to create the mindset shift where we now have this beautiful platforms like these to talk about Indigenous insights. And I've always seen my role, I'm literally an inheritor of an Indigenous settlement. I sat my first university exams as my people were singing in our parliament. And like, our job as this generation is to create these kind of tools. And back in the Suki place, and these things should matter, this intervention model is going to get called the Kāinga intervention model to honour Papa Mānuka, which is kind of where Chellie started. So I think I'll finish there. These things are offered in a spirit of exploration, because we are working with knowledge and precedent and legacy as carefully as we can. But equally, part of the legacies we've inherited is knowing that there is global knowledge and practice that we can learn from, to be inspired by, but importantly, to apply in our own communities to make us better versions of ourselves. Our tribal precedents are very much that we have borrowed liberally from those who will be our friends to innovate on our own terms, to drive our own futures. And I really hope that events like this are an opportunity for us all to learn from those legacies. Thank you for your time. It's beautiful, and I'll try and stop crying now. Nā reira, tēnā rau koutou.
Well, thank you so much. Really wonderful presentations. really need time to really for everything to sink in. I think I can open the questions, the floor for the questions, and I've seen a few ones in the chat already. Maybe Paul Rogers, who you asked a while ago, while Chellie was still making a presentation. Do you want to ask a question, and then we go to Alistair?
No, I got an answer.
You got an answer.
Thanks, Laura, for the opportunity. But yeah, I got an answer there from. Sorry, I just checking the pronunciation of the name, Chellie, and that's all fine for now. Give me a couple of weeks, maybe a bit more, and then I'll share some more about what I've written underneath with the intention for a conference, but we're still waiting for confirmation of the budget for that. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Shall we go to Alistair? Please ask a question.
Hi, thanks very much, and thank you for those amazing talks. I wanted to ask a question that goes in like kind of two directions, and it really sort of, I think, continues on from some of the things Sacha was just touching on just at the end there, and I wondered about this framework and how we use it, and in two ways. One is how has this related to other Indigenous peoples and cultures? To what extent are they, as their influence from other places as well? Because I feel like there's a really sort of important dimension here when we talk about Indigenous culture. We're talking about a huge diversity of different cultures, but then there are commonalities there. And I was wondering if there were any conversations that had happened in that way in relating to other Indigenous peoples in terms of development of this framework. And the other way is I'm wondering, I can look at this. I'm in Europe, from a very Western place, and obviously it's very inspiring. But how do people like me, how can we apply this and use this in a way which honors and respects the people who've created it in a way that you would be happy with us using? Because I feel that issue of appropriation is really, really important when we're looking at these kinds of frameworks. So thank you.
I'm happy to start, Sacha, if you want to come. Oh, sorry, were you going to go first?
Aroha mai, I understood that as a kia ora wai order related one, so I was going to go. Is that okay?
Yeah, go. Aye.
I think with really, so the last question about being careful and risks of appropriation, I want to thank you for bringing that into the conversation, because I think it's really important and it's a question that will be shared across many. And I think for kia ora wai order, kia ora wai order is intentionally in the public domain, and it was designed for the purpose of being used. And so I think that as long as you're coming at it with genuine intent and there's publicly available handbooks and the like, you should feel like you've got explicit permission to go ahead. That when we were developing that, and that was developed by pukinga Māori thought leaders from across the country, and my role was to just translate that into practical stuff. I'm not a holder of mātauranga Māori, that's not my lane. I'm an interpreter about what you do with it. That's just to clarify that I wasn't elevating myself beyond my pay grade. But those pukinga, those ones who hold the knowledge, were really clear that the purpose of Kia ora wai order and all of the tools that go with it is to rewire the way public institutions think. So any efforts to apply the Kia ora wai order tools in public institutions is entirely upholding the intent of the people from whom it came. So that's why I think you've got explicit permission to work with Kia ora wai order tools and all of their systems, maps. And then the second question about, was that developed through dialogue with other Indigenous communities? The answer is yes, no, and it will, in the sense that I think 𝐊𝐴 is young, and as much as it is ancient, some of the catalysts for how it was shaped are definitely inter-Indigenous bumping into each other, like the beautiful time that Chellie and I have had in North America together. Without those North American conversations, 𝐊𝐴 would not be as it is. But in terms of the state that it's in now, it's only, I think we might have published that handbook material less than a year ago. So we're just at the point now where we get to have these beautiful and valuable international conversations, and it will continue to evolve, I think. So that's the 𝐊𝐴 lens. Chellie, pass to you for the bigger picture.
Oh, I know you answered that beautifully, Sacha, but just very quickly, I think the invitation for you, Alistair, is to go on that journey of reconnection, into place and genealogy and, ancestral lines. And, I think there's part of the invitation is to be really connected to the work at a deeper level as well, rather than just as a tool, but to also really learn about Indigenous peoples in the spaces of this world, and to really go on that journey of learning as well. So very much what Sacha was saying. And I guess one of the things I saw in the chat just here is, and Sacha was mentioning it as well, is, resilience and decision making and intelligence. It's an operating intelligence inside the culture. It's not sort of a Western psychotherapeutic thing to help people bounce back better. Is to really get out of the way and come alongside whānau and families, and to listen and be at that grassroots level of leadership. So to really, for us, our resilience is this incredible intelligence that exists within the culture, and the access and the freedom to express it. So I don't know how you translate that into your work, but it's to say that actually that resilience is in our DNA, and each generation is called to be the living face of what we call wayfinders, or people who go on these journeys of discovery. So perhaps it's to say, how do we find those reconnections, those rememberings, coming right back to the beginning of the talk, something that we all, it's new within us, 𝐊𝐴, not something NEW.
Thank you so much. It's so hard to end this conversation because I feel it's providing such deep insights, and it's such I would have loved to keep it going for so much longer, but we're sadly coming to the end of our session for today. We're so grateful, Chellie and Sacha, that you could join us today to share your deep wisdom and insights, which have been really moving. So a huge thank you to both of you again. Chellie and the WEAll Aotearoa team, thank you so much for helping to make this happen and all of the amazing work that you do. And then, of course, all of you in the audience, thank you for spending your time with us today. And I hope that it's offered, I'm sure that it's offered new inspirations for ways forward. So if you might have any suggestions for future topics or speakers, then please do reach out to us. And I think Laura will be putting my contact details in the chat. If you are a policymaker and you'd like to receive invites to these sessions directly into your inbox, then please do sign up to the Wellbeing Economy Policymakers Network. And again, you will find the link to do that in the chat. If you're curious to learn more about what a wellbeing economy approach can mean for government, then I'd encourage you to also check out our free online course on wellbeing economy policy design, with beautiful contributions also from Sacha in Module 5. And then lastly, I just wanted to signpost you to our upcoming WEAll talk on Wednesday, the 2nd of July, to mark the release of a new open access book with the latest insights on wellbeing science and policy from 18 countries, with contributions from over 40 different authors. So again, you will find the registration link for that in the chat. Thank you so much for the conversation today. It really meant a lot. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of your evening and your day today. And Chellie, I'll hand over to you then one more time to close this session for us.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. I feel like my mind feels maybe busier, but then actually my nervous system is feeling more calm after this session. So yeah, lots to mull on and think of. Yeah, your kōrero is a tonga for us all. So I'll close with a karakia. We can go off for evenings or days. So kia tauna manaakitanga o te ringaro ki runga I tēnā o tātou, kia mahia te hua mākihiki, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori, kia tūturu whiti whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e hui e, tai ki e, ora koutou. And in Te Reo Pākehā, I forget sometimes just really quickly in English around let the strength and life force of our ancestors be with each and every one of us, freeing the path of obstruction so that our words, spiritual power, love and language are upheld. Forward together. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good day.